Had a young man here at one time who sustained his career-ending concussion slipping and falling in the shower. Unfortunately, Mom and Dad didn't know about the 2 previous concussions that he'd received, doing things that he didn't really want them to know that he'd done. They only knew about the one that he'd gotten playing football in high school. So instead of only a history of 1 concussion with a new one, he now had a history of 3 concussions with 1 new one. So we're looking at something fundamentally different. You also want to know about face, head, and cervical spine injuries that someone has had. So that's important that that's included on your physical exam form. And then that's where the knowledge and honesty of everybody becomes really important here. So very quickly, modifying factors, gender. So I mentioned that already. Young women tend to take longer to get better. If they have loss of consciousness for less than a minute, that modify your management a little bit. Amnesia, how long they have it, is more important than them having it in and of itself. If they have some sort of motor and convulsive phenomena, you're going to manage that using standard protocols. And then we've already talked about depression, and I mentioned the dizziness. So if they have dizziness in their initial symptom set, research is showing us, at least preliminarily, research is showing us that those patients tend to take a little bit longer to get better. So the question that always comes up is, well, why can't they play if they have a concussion? And so the reason they can't play with a concussion is something we call second impact syndrome. And I've included a handout on second impact syndrome. But second impact syndrome occurs only in cases where students have an existing concussion that has not resolved and they receive another hit to the head or an impact that could cause a concussion. So it's really, really, really important to understand that. You can't get second impact syndrome in cases where you don't have a currently unresolved concussion. Sadly, these do happen every year, and the large majority of these young people don't survive their second impact syndrome scenario, and if they do, they have profound changes to their life that occur because of it. So it's important to understand that there are things that can occur that we don't really want to have happen during this time. So it's important that they're honest about their symptoms, they're truly gone, and they truly feel normal when they come back to play. Children do make this a little bit different, so it's a little harder with school, and you have to take that into consideration, and that can be managed to a degree utilizing the resources that are there, and there's a whole other series of time we can spend on what it takes to return students to the classroom. So there's lots of good materials available out there. Again, it's still no return to play on the same day, and they must be clinically completely symptom-free to return. So we're going to talk a little bit about prevention. I know I deal with a lot of families who thinks that helmets will fix everything, but I looked up a recent study done in 2011 that said there is little evidence supporting the use of helmets or mouth guards to prevent it outside of sports like cycling, skiing, and snowboarding. So that's the other thing that comes up is that students think because they're wearing this really fancy, expensive helmet that it's going to protect their head from a concussion. No, it's to protect your head from a skull fracture. It's not to protect your head from a concussion. They haven't developed that equipment yet. So this is where proper technique and coaching comes in. There is absolutely no substitute for good habits on and off the field when it comes to skills. So teaching and developing proper skills, proper tackling, proper body placement, all are so critical. And the younger and younger we start student athletes in this process, the better off they're going to be. One of the problems that the young kids really have is they're compensating for bigger body types that they're playing against, so they're having to modify how they do things. So it's really important to make sure they're learning the fundamentals in an absolutely stepwise progression. Rule changes become important as well. I've always been a proponent of enforcing the ones we have. If we enforce the ones we have, it'll probably take care of itself. Violence in sport seems to be on the rise, so we have to be aware of that too. And ultimately, for me, this comes down to education, understanding what a concussion is, what we need to do about it, why it's important that everyone be educated, not only coaches and student athletes, but parents, administrators, the general population need to know what it is, why it's important to not ignore, why it's important to wait till you're symptom-free to participate. So those are really important. So there's a lot of new and ongoing research out there. So I have just listed this in question form. So how many hits are too many? So how many concussions should somebody have? And does that vary from person to person and doctor to doctor? And at what point in time do you want to be able to have a normal life moving forward? So those are questions that get asked. So is there that magic number that once you've had 4, once you've had 8, you need to, end your career? So that question hasn't been answered yet. We already briefly discussed the subconcussive forces over time. So is there a total sum of hits over time that only one person can take? Again, that's something that the question is out there. They're working on it. Is there a concussion threshold? So that's subconcussive force. Computerized neurocognitive testing, where is that taking us, and what is that going to look like in the future? They're working on blood tests to determine if someone has had that neurological cascade going on in their brain after sustaining a hit. They haven't finalized or perfected those yet. They're still working on it. The detection of tau in the living brain. Many of you have probably heard about chronic traumatic encephaly. There was a recent study that came out that where the statistics were very skewed towards getting chronic traumatic encephaly. So there's questions about how many brains they evaluated and why they had those brains. So there's lots of questions, but they're working on detecting it in a living person rather than having to do it on autopsy, and that's where they're doing work with PET scans, so they can actually have a scan to see if there's changes going on in the brain. Rest versus light activity during recovery. So is there a place for absolute rest? I think the answer to that we're finding is no. But at what point do you introduce light activity, and how do you manage and control that? And then recently there's been a lot of talk about this test called the Devic test, which uses a eye test to determine concussion. So there's a lot of current research being undertaken regarding that. I think you're going to see a lot of results of that coming out here in the next 6 to 12 months. So it'll be really interesting to see this as a sideline test that can be done very easily by just about anybody. From what I read so far, I don't know a lot about it, but it looks very promising moving forward. And the last thing I want to spend some time, just a few minutes talking about, a couple minutes, is the changing of the culture. So this is where all the research seems to be going, or much of the research seems to be going, is that what does the sport culture look like for student athletes? The CDC's Heads Up program has spent a lot of time on this, and they have a really interesting set of details out there now that involve 5 groups of individuals building a culture around sports for student athletes. And so this program, which is linked in the PowerPoint, so if you take the time to get on it, you're going to see that it's an opportunity to reshape the culture around concussion. So how coaches talk about concussions, as well as parents, influences how young student athletes decide to talk about their symptoms. Young athletes also feel lots of pressure to hide their concussion symptoms, and in fact, a recent study done in the state of Washington, 69% of student athletes did not report concussion symptoms, and 40% of coaches didn't recognize those symptoms. And so those numbers are really telling, that not only are student athletes hiding, but coaches really aren't noticing when their student athletes have some symptoms. And not all coaches do that, but all students, some students really hide that well, so that becomes really problematic. They're also more likely to play with a concussion during a big game. What define big game becomes the question. And then healthcare providers and school professionals can play a really important role in getting young athletes back to returning to learn and play successfully without any long-term effects. So this document actually talks about creating a safe sport culture, and athletes to thrive when they get these kinds of things from their coaches, their parents, their school administrators, and their friends. So having fun, getting positive messages, having parents who talk about concussion and model and expect safe play as well as injury, so this goes for injury too. Do they feel comfortable telling somebody they have symptoms? Or are they going to be dismissed? Are they going to be ridiculed? So I think that's where I'm going to open it to questions. Hopefully I've covered some things that, that are useful. And then there are lots of references here for you to utilize as you move forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie, for that valuable information. We do have a couple of questions here. The first question I have is, for school, how vital is the doctor's notes? We have had doctors that give a physician's order for specialized classroom instruction. Sometimes we feel the student is ready to return to learning in some aspects sooner than their next appointment. Must schools follow a physician's order to a T? We can only provide accommodations based on the doctor's recommendation.
I think it's really important to start with where they're at, but also figure out a way to be in communication with the doctor's office, and that might actually ease some of those problems. So maybe not daily, because I know that that is with outside of the constraints of, you know, busy days. But if there's a way for the parent to help the school liaise with the nurse at the doctor's office and say, so Joey was able to do this today, feels a lot better, can we advance them to the next stage of moving them forward? So as an athletic trainer, when I'm at a school every day, I can adjust based on how they are progressing. So I would like to think that a teacher can take that into consideration and make adjustments to make it progressively more difficult or more normal for that student. But often you're right, if they're not going back to the doctor for 2 weeks, it doesn't make sense to not continue to progress them forward. So that's where trying to get a team together and having the parent provide permission for a short period of time for the nurse to collaborate with someone at school can be very helpful. Whether
Leslie, we lost you there.
Oh, completely?
Oh, I can hear you now. Okay.
Okay, so it's really important that some sort of communication to continue the progression. So you don't want to just keep them someplace for 2 weeks, because that's not appropriate. You need to continue to facilitate them forward, because if 7 to 10 days is all it's going to take for them to get better, you need to be able to advance their schoolwork along the way as well, just like we would their physical activity.
All right, good deal. So the next question is here, do you know of anyone that comes into schools to talk with students about concussions?
Quite frankly, I can't imagine an athletic trainer that you couldn't contact that would be willing to do that. There have to be doctors that would be willing to do that as well. A lot of it depends on the level that you want to do, but I have lots of colleagues in the state of Iowa that I sure would be happy to do that kind of outreach, just to get the word out there as well. That's something I can work with our professional organization to get a list of people who are willing to have those kinds of conversations, if that's something that individuals are interested in doing. I know I would be happy to have those kinds of conversations with student athletes, and I'm willing to do that. And at what level families want that at. That can be really important. In fact, the research that I was sharing from Washington State said that face-to-face is actually better for both students and coaches and parents. So doing an online thing, although like a test where you read things and take the test, that isn't as good as doing it face-to-face or in an interactive way. So
yes, and I guess I can add into
if you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say that if anybody has questions too, they can always shoot us an email here at BIAIA, and we can try and get people connected to resources as well, if Leslie, you were unable to do so. Or
yep.
There's also a lot of videos out there right now through various sources that have short video clips that are geared, and their target audience is students. So we're happy to help share those as well.
Absolutely, and those are fantastic because they're geared towards kids, and they're designed in modalities that they are interested in watching, more importantly. Listening to me babble on isn't going to excite a high school kid or a junior high kid, but there's some really good stuff out there right now that would be helpful.
Great. Great. The last question that we have here right now is, did you say earlier that Tylenol was okay to give the concussed athlete?
As I understand it, acetaminophen products, which are Tylenol-based products, or well, that's what Tylenol is, acetaminophen, it would be the first line. So you wouldn't give them an Advil, ibuprofen-based product without, I wouldn't go there without a doctor's express instruction for that, because Advil-based products or ibuprofen products may cause bleeding. And it's just it's a caveat, it's a safety thing. So if you start with Tylenol and the doctor tells you no, it's okay, you can take Advil, you can take Aleve, then go down that path. But I as a medical professional would wait for the doctor to say it's okay to take that. So Tylenol is where I start according to the label directions.
Yes. All right, so here we have another one. Recently, I had a high school student sustain a concussion and was evaluated in the ER. The ER wrote, the ER physician wrote an order stating the athlete could not return to play for 14 days. His evaluation showed he was ready to continue his return to play after 8 days. If he would have been ready sooner than 14 days, would you have sent him back to play despite the doctor's referral said, or would you follow the doctor referral to the exact writing?
I would have called the doctor. And my role as an athletic trainer, that's within my purview to say, you know, this is where we are. So, I mean, that becomes one where a parent would need to ask those questions. There may have been a reason that I don't know based on that student athlete's evaluation that they may have said 14 days, but I think that's where concussion becomes tricky. It's everybody's different, and giving a standard 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it's just not something that's easy to do. And so in that case, I would have asked the student athlete to either follow up with their family physician, which is what the ER doctor probably wouldn't have seen them again, follow up with their family physician and see what their family physician had said. And if they had gone through the procedures, providing that documentation to the physician that saw them to see if they would indeed say, no, it really is okay for you to go back. I'm not going to be one of those people that goes against a doctor's order, because I mean, I have to function under doctor's orders, so that's the way my license to practice works, but it doesn't mean I'm not willing to call and have a conversation.
Great, thank you very much. I think that those are all the questions here for right now, so I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen back to me here so that I can go ahead and share some information about the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. All right. So again, my name is Melissa Morford, Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. I'm a neuro resource facilitator here. I just wanted to kind of give a brief 5-minute overview of some of the services that we have here at the Brain Injury Alliance and how to go about connecting with us regarding questions or concerns that may arise with some of the students that you're working with. So for some of you that may not know, the Brain Injury Alliance is a statewide service. We do have a couple of offices here in Iowa, but we do work with all counties in Iowa. We have an office in Iowa City, Urbandale, and Waterloo. And we work with brain injury survivors, caregivers, and professionals. So the primary service that I just wanted to review today is our neuro resource facilitation. This is a free service through the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa that helps individuals with brain injury, their families, caregivers, just kind of help find questions and answers that individuals may have. We help individuals choose, get, and keep information, service, and supports to make informed choices and meet their goals. And basically what that means is that we just kind of provide periodic follow-up services to families and survivors who express that they're interested in an ongoing service. But we always welcome individuals to contact us anytime with questions that may arise too. So how does neuro resource facilitation work? We provide brain injury specific information and resources in a variety of formats. One example of one of the resources that we have that some of you may have seen before are pediatric quick guides. Those are those blue flip books. And those quick guides just have a lot of information about cognitive and behavioral challenges that school professionals may see in the classroom, and just provides suggestions on how to address some of those challenges. We also provide a variety of trainings throughout the year, just like the webinar here today. We always put those on our website, which again is www.biaia.org. It's our goal to help provide information about local supports and community resources that exist as well. So a lot of times we'll give out lists of brain injury specific providers, mental health referrals, and home health agencies. We also work with survivors and families to find the most appropriate funding options for their family. As some of you may be aware, the brain injury wait list right now is about 2.5 years. So a lot of times we're working with individuals to find alternatives as they wait to access some of the services through the waiver. The last thing here on our list is the tote bags that we have. Those tote bags were designed to provide an array of information on those common physical, emotional, social, cognitive changes that one might see after a brain injury. We also put a lot of resources in there as well for brain injury survivors. So if anybody's interested in any of these resources that I have listed here, you're always welcome to contact us by phone or email to get a print copy. And again, they are usually available on our website. We have virtual copies of those as well. On this next slide here, we have listed a few of our additional supports and services. The Brain Injury Resource Network, or our IBRN sites, our distribution locations for our tote bags in the state of Iowa. So some of you may have had a family or student already receive a tote bag from a health provider or an emergency room when they were there for something like a concussion. It works to support local service providers. We provide them trainings and give them case consults as well on specific questions that they may have. We also have support groups here in the state of Iowa. We do our best to provide periodic updates about things that are happening in those support groups. But if you're interested in finding a support group near you, we do have our list on our website again, but happy to pass that out to anybody that's interested. There is a support group facilitator for each group that works to sort of lead the different events and conversation around brain injury. And then the last item we have listed here are case consultations, and we just always say that when in doubt, just give us a call to ask questions. We try to provide support for professionals like teachers and other school staff to help support students that have had a concussion or a brain injury. Happy to help where we can, or just get you connected to the right resource. And then here on this last slide, I do have just kind of a visual representation of the various systems that an individual with a brain injury might encounter. As you can see here, it can be often overwhelming and confusing to know which are the most important resources to access at any given time, and then to how one goes about accessing some of those resources. So we work with families to help kind of navigate those systems and prioritize concerns. So again, we just always want to be available to survivors, caregivers, and professionals when questions come up. So. And then if anybody is interested in contacting us, we have our toll-free number there listed. The email address is just our general email address to ask general questions. Again, our website is listed. And then if anybody has specific questions about today's presentation, they are welcome to contact me by phone or email as well. All right, so if anybody has any questions, they can go ahead and ask those now. I'll leave it open here for about a minute or so. Otherwise, we will go ahead and close things out. Okay, so I don't see any questions coming up, but again, thank you to everyone that has attended today. The recorded webinar will be available within a few days, and that certificate of attendance will be sent out by email. So please be sure to also complete our survey at the end of the webinar. And again, thank you.